Alors, bonsoir tout le monde. J'ai
Good
quelques
evening, everyone. I have a few messages to share with you. The city of Dieppe recognizes that the land on which it operates is part of the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship that the Mi'kmaq jointly developed and signed with the British Crown in the 18th century. The treaties did not deal with the surrender of the land or resources, but in fact recognized Mi'kmaq title and established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between the parties. And secondly, dear colleagues, let's have the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Before we start right into the thick of things, I would like to take this opportunity as an additional opening word. I would like to take this opportunity to this evening to mark an anniversary of great significance. Recently, the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators recognized, oh, he's already turning red. It recognized the 35 years of service of our uh, chief administrative officer for his 35 years of service as a municipal senior manager. I've had the great pleasure of working closely with Marc for a number of years. He's a graduate of the Université of Moncton in recreation and in business administration. And Marc joined the staff of the city of Dieppe in 1996 and has been CAO since 2007. He began his career as recreation director in La Mecque, and he still has friends there, I'm told. Yeah. And then held the same position here in Dieppe, customer service, teamwork, and responsible management are the values that led him to integrate the Lean Six Sigma approach to continuous improvement at the city of Dieppe. Dedicated and passionate about his work, Marc has won a number of recognition awards, including one from the New Brunswick Association of Recreational Workers. He also received, in 2014, he received the Hermel Couturier Award for his hard work and the impact he has had and his commitment to his community. For many years now, Marc has been responsible for the Sister City program with Dieppe in France. He even starred in the Dieppe play in 2004. There were a number of well-known actors in that production. We are fortunate that he has not chosen, or rather, that he has chosen not to pursue his acting career and to remain with us and thus actively participating in Dieppe's phenomenal growth over the last decades. Throughout his career, Marc has served on a number of committees, organizations, and associations. Today, he is a member of the board of directors of the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators. And whether it was the expansion uh, for the expansion of the AJL Center, the construction of the new City Hall, and the new Operations Center, the opening of the market, and the opening of Dover Park, the hosting of the Jeux de l'Acadie and the Congrès Mondial Acadien, as well as the Jeux de la Francophonie Canadienne. Marc has always been there for his staff and residents. He's always there, he's always present for staff and residents with a positive attitude and an admirable work ethic. Mark, on my own behalf, on behalf of Municipal Council and the entire staff, I'd like to congratulate you for your 35 years as a municipal administrator, and I thank you sincerely for your dedication, your loyalty, and for all of the work you've done for Dieppe over the years. And I wish you continued success.
Alors, pour continuer,
Moving along, I'd like to open this evening's meeting. We do have quorum. Everybody is present. Are there any conflicts of interest to declare? Do any members have a conflict of interest this evening? Yes, Ms. Leboutier, Councillor Leboutier, on item number, as mentioned in the email 10.5.2. So when we get there, we will allow you to withdraw. It's for those who might need devices for simultaneous interpretation. Yeah, just a reminder. If you need a device for the simultaneous interpretation services,
back of the room. Merci.
Thank you.
Adoption de l'ordre du jour.
The adoption of the agenda, I would need a motion. It's been moved by Councillor Thibodeau, seconded by Councillor Godet. On the question, all those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye. Contrary, nay. Carried. Presentations, inquiries, and petitions. We will start, as usual, with the inquiries by council members of the and of citizens of the Kodiak Regional RCMP. And as always, we are happy to welcome Inspector Chantal Farah this evening to say a few words. As soon as I can turn on your mic, to explain to us what's going on in the community. Good evening. Good evening, Your Worship, councillors. I just have a few things to mention this evening. Recently at the Kodiak detachment, we had a student who was studying at the Miramichi Community College. She did her placement for a 3-week period. She's studying police services. We took the time to develop a pilot project with her, and we gave her a desk at the entrance of the detachment just to welcome people, to say hello when they come in and to sort them out according to their request. You'll know that there's a counter at the entrance, but and then some corridors, but if you don't know where to go, it's very confusing. So with this, her lovely smile and her training at the community college, we had some great comments from people saying they were welcomed very politely. There's a little less chaos in their lives when they know where to go. So we were then be able to offer her a part-time job for the summer, and we'll continue. We will see that it's really helpful for people who are waiting for services. Now, on behalf of the Crime Reduction Unit, just an overview very quickly of the efforts we have made to reduce crime in the region, and also a few words on those who continue their open-air drug use. Over the last 2 weeks, officers have arrested 4 people and 1 woman who were consuming in an open air in the busier areas in the downtown Moncton area. That's where most of the problems are. And as usual, we seize the illegal drugs, we do our intervention, we offer them services, and we encourage them to make healthy choices. Now, through these checks, we also identified 1 person who was had some arrest warrants against him, so he was arrested. And the word is getting around because the officers have told me that sometimes when they arrive on the scene, they're told, "We know you're sneaking up on us. You don't need to." And that's exactly the message we want to get out. If you have a drug problem, you need to take advantage of the services, but not hide. So I'm happy that the police is there, the presence is there, because that will help change behavior, and that's the objective. On behalf of the provincial tactical traffic uh, section, they came for a joint enforcement operation. We on At the end of May, there was a joint operation in Riverview, Moncton, and Dieppe to make sure that people were compliant with the Motor Vehicle Act. We arrested 5 people who had suspended driver's licenses. One person was arrested for driving while impaired. 5 vehicles were uninsured, and 22 vehicles were towed during the operation because they weren't in any condition to be on the roads. 256 traffic violations were issued and 34 warnings. So once again, the message has to get out that we have to drive safely and respect the vehicle code, traffic code. And on behalf of the RCMP and Kodiak, we'd like to congratulate all of the grade 12 grads, Mathieu Martin. They are graduating on June 23rd. We'd just like to remind them to have a safe graduation and make sure that you plan your graduation with your parents so that you can celebrate, but responsibly and safely. Graduation is on Sunday, and we're happy to see the future's leaders there. Thank you. Thank you, Inspector. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Turgeon-Roy. Thank you, Your Worship. I was wondering about the pilot project that we had launched last year for to identify modified vehicles. You had an arrangement with the garage. Is that still being done? Or are you going to be doing that this year? Yes, that pilot project. Well, during that project, we had trained one officer per watch so that they could listen and keep their eye out to see which cars had been modified, which had noisy mufflers. And when they stopped them, we had a partnership with Taylor Ford in Moncton, and we could direct them to Taylor Ford to inspect the vehicle right away. It was very helpful, and our community police officers are now looking to see if we could spread the initiative by with another company in Dieppe and one in Riverview, perhaps. So we're still working on it, but of course, it worked well last year, so we want to continue on. Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? If not, once again, thank you for your presentation. And as always, you're more than welcome to stay, but if we will understand if you need to leave, but we know the workload that you have. So thank you once again. Now, presentations, set 7.2. It's a presentation on the Quest subdivision, Quest Capital Inc. subdivision. Presentation by Stéphane Bourque.
Je l'ouvre ici, c'est ça?
Oui.
C'est bon? Bonsoir tout le monde.
Good evening, everyone. Your worship, councillors, thank you for having us here this evening to listen to the citizens of Dieppe and our concerns with regard to this subdivision. My name is Stéphane Bourque. I grew up in Moncton. I've been living in Dieppe now for about 15 years. I practice family medicine in the Moncton area since 2009. I'm a basketball coach in Dieppe. I'm also a scout leader in Dieppe, and I had mentioned that last time, but I think it's important for people to realize that we really enjoy life here, and it's a great place to live, and that's why we're here this evening. I'd like to just say a few words on our last meeting on May 23rd. There were 3 main things. On the one hand, Dieppe wants to densify. That's clear. That's the message that got across, and that's understandable. They want to avoid urban sprawl. They want to concentrate services, and that's why there's a R4 zoning south of Bouchard Street. Developers, amongst other things, want to maximize their profits. It's a private company. They're interested in increasing the returns, and sometimes it's not necessarily compatible with what the citizens who live next door are interested in. But the current citizens who live in Dieppe today want to maintain a quality of life, a family life, one that is peaceful and attractive. And that's why we all came to Dieppe to begin with. It's not unreasonable. It's not asking too much. We just want to be safe with green spaces. Now, how can we ensure that all three parties, how that it's a win-win situation for all? So this is the subdivision plan that had been presented last meeting, and I understand that it's just a tool. It's prepared by the planners and the engineers on AutoCAD, but I thought it was very representative of what's going on in Dieppe and on Bouchard Street. If you notice here, it's a void. It's an empty space there. You can hardly see the houses. It's tunnel vision. All you see is this development, and I understand it's just a work tool, but I found that it symbolized, it really represented the very narrow view compared to the overall view that is this. Some people live here, some people have set up their homes and their families here, have chosen to live here. Whereas this, we can see that the plan that we saw last time is not an overall view. So R4 zoning, that's not the problem. That's not what we're challenging. We know that, and is Quest is in its full rights to build apartment buildings. But for us, what we see is the total lack of protection. We have single family residences, homes. There's about 20 houses here and what, and now we're looking at towards having 15 or 16 apartment buildings of 5, 6 floors. We don't even know yet, even though we've been asking for the information. But it's probably the largest development in Moncton and maybe in all of New Brunswick, as far as I know. I don't know if there are any other subdivisions or developments so large. It's not like any other development. It really warrants looking very specifically at it. Now, the developer doesn't have any vested rights at this point, but once you've given your approval, then it'll be too late to step back. Fortunately, the city actually has the necessary tools to take action and rectify the situation. So we have really two requests. The first one, closing Janica Street. So once again, the development might have, and I'm giving these figures, they're approximative, but what Quest is going to follow us here. Perhaps they will enlighten us on what is being projected here, because it's important. It's important to have all of the necessary information before making a decision. So 1,000, 2,000 doors, those are figures we've heard. We don't know. 15 apartment buildings, we don't know. But that thousands of extra cars every day, and closing Janica Street would avoid hundreds or thousands of cars going through the neighborhood. There is more than one access street, but humans will always look for the lane of least resistance. Instead of turning left or turning right, they're going to go straight because it's clear it's going to increase the traffic. Origine Street will have 3 exits on Murray, Dieppe Boulevard, and Keith. And there are young families who are using the streets to drive their bikes, to use their scooters and their foot scooters. But if we open up from Keith and Janica, well, the risk is increasing of accidents and traffic. It's not even just a risk. It's obvious that the traffic will increase. Of course, that the closing the street would greatly increase the subdivision's tranquility, and it just doesn't even affect the developer. The developer isn't interested in this street. There were some meetings with the representatives of the street, and I'm not going to speak on behalf of anybody else, but if I understood correctly, this street is not essential to the developer for their vision of the development, and it wouldn't cost anything. money isn't everything, but it is important, and it wouldn't cost anything. They would stop up and close a road that doesn't exist. It would probably save money for the developer because then there'd be more space. So, and just to show you, I do have a picture if I go back very quickly. Janica Street, is this a touch screen or not? No. Okay. So Janica, if you're not familiar with it, is this little street here. So if we close this, it becomes a dead end. And the only people going in there would be the people who are out for a Sunday drive or people who live there. Janica Street will, in their vision, it'll connect up to Origin and Keith Street. And so you, in the morning, you can come out here and turn left instead of going that way. So other streets will be created, but there will be people on these streets. Now, there was the whole issue of safety as well. Now, I'd heard from the fire chief, but sometimes, we've heard say that one access road is dangerous, of course. So these, we went around through different areas of Dieppe, the citizens of Bouchard, to see some figures. Here, there are 7 different streets here that only have one access point, one entrance, and you can see the distance and the size of the ball represents the number of residents. The only one that has fewer residents than us is Andrea Crescent. We have 29. There are 35. Tade has, you can see all the figures here, 36, 55. So the precedent exists. Even on the next slide here, you can see Rue Verte. This is Bouchard with our streets that we just see. Rue Verte here, one entrance. And that's why it's a risk for us and it's not a risk for them. There are other houses here, and if were to be an accident here, there's no way for them to get out. And so we said, in any case, it's a theoretical risk. If there's an accident anywhere on Bouchard Street, you, you'd, oops, there'd have to be an accident right here, and that would block the access of the firemen. But that's possible, but it's improbable. But the same thing would happen in these other developments. So we're not asking for an exception. We're asking to be treated the same way as these other subdivisions. And they also don't have 2,000 extra doors next door. That's not our first modification request. And then the second request is the addition of a buffer zone between the homes on Bouchard Street and this development. There are a number of different green space impacts, the improvement of the air quality, reduction in the urban heat island. It's good for physical and mental health. It's a reduction of the number of cardiovascular diseases. We don't, in 2023, we don't need to repeat the importance of green spaces and with climate warming. So in September 2022, there was a natural buffer zone that was perfectly adequate. This is the first image on the left. This is before they cut. And then on the right, they had started clearing all of the trees. And then we woke up the next day and then there was nothing left. This is a choice that they made, irreversible choice. I would have said that if they hadn't cut this, there would be mature trees like you see here. I'm convinced that I wouldn't be here before you this evening if they had left them, because we all cried. Well, we were floored actually when we got home from work and we saw that day and we saw that everything had been cut. And you can see with the tree bylaw coming up, these aren't the only developers that have done it. A number of them have hastened to cut their trees so that they wouldn't have to deal with it later, because there's another developer on Bouchard cut everything, clear cut everything. It wasn't Quest, but it's right next door and another developer. So it's inevitable, but we can't live in the past. We're here today. So our second request is this: land for public purposes. There are about 46 acres in total of this lot. And if I'm wrong in my figures, please correct me, but these are the figures that I was given. So about 10% of the land is to be turned over to the city as land for public purposes, LPP. If 4.6 acres of LPP were behind Bouchard zone, that would give 250 feet of buffer zone. The street is 250 feet long with the homes and 200 feet a buffer zone. That would be ideal. But we're not saying you'd have to put the whole LPP there. You could put some in the other areas of the territory. Just 1 acre, one part of that 10% would give 52 feet of buffer zone. So it's not an all or nothing. It doesn't all have to be right there. We realize that. We're just, if you want to put it all in the north of the property and the planner degree, that's fine. But even if it's just a part of it, just a crumb to protect us, that would make an enormous difference. And you can see imagine the people who live right there. I mean, imagine if that's behind your house, and then there's and then behind that you see a parking lot, and then a 4 to 6 story building. So everybody says not in my backyard, but I mean, if you live there, is what you would like to have, or would you prefer to have a 10 or 15 meters, 30 feet of a buffer zone of a tree? And even people who live in an apartment building, they don't want to necessarily see people lying out on their deck or it's win-win for everyone with this buffer zone. So this is what we're asking for. As well, there was an idea that the land for public purposes has to be a park and only a park. And Z3, pages 1 to 3, say that land for public purposes is land other than streets for recreation and for the the uh, enjoyment. A park, it can be a green belt or a buffer zone separating different facilities. So LPP can be used for that. Yes, it could be a park. We love parks, but it could also be this instead. And this isn't this this is for the citizens who live in Dieppe today, who pay their taxes today. And lastly, I'd like to wrap up with the public's participation policy taken from your website and the city. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. I don't know if you've read it, but it says that people who are going to be impacted by a decision have to participate in the decision-making process. That's why we're here this evening, in order to it takes into account the views of participants and the design of participation methods and provides them with information. And then there are different zones. So if you go to the upper participation model, which is what we're hoping the city to uh, we have the high engagement level. We would have engaged citizens who are acting at all stages of the decision-making process, including the development of options, and the final choice, the public will have the final decision. So the public is telling you what it wants. It doesn't prevent the development. It doesn't prevent densification. Everybody can have their piece of the pie. We just ask that we be considered. And in summary, the public participation policy is based on the conviction that the people who are affected have the right to be involved in the decision-making process. So the first modification would be to close Janica Street. This street similar to Bouchard exists with a single exit. Modification number 2 to create a buffer zone between Bouchard and the development. And I'd just like to end on this. It's the time to reflect now. And it was tabled because we needed further information. But if the plan is accepted the way it is presented this evening, well, essentially, then there will be nothing left to be done. If the developer chooses to give us a buffer zone, they can do so. Like they can refuse. We have no influence. We try to get something concrete. We try to see if they would be ready to write anything down or just give a handshake. But I'll ask them. I'll ask them if they're ready to do that. You can ask them if they want to do that. We can't oblige them to do anything. You have been elected to represent us, and that's why you're listening to us this evening. You are our voice, and you are the ones who have the power to tell them. You could say, in terms of the LPP, you could say, well, I mean, you have to listen to us, but I mean, you have meetings to listen, and you're here to listen to us. The developer, well, yes, if they want to add buffer zones, I'm going to be in favor, of course, but it's not up to them, really. Honestly, it's not their job to do so. It's up to the city to make sure that it's there. So for this reason, we ask you to refuse the proposed plan, the plan proposed by the PAC, And oh, it's going to be here for 100 years. And the fire hasn't caught yet, so make sure that we avoid the fire. It's a historical decision here. We have to make sure it's the right one. It has to be informed. We need all of the information. I'm glad to see that Quest will be following me to explain exactly what their plan is, and perhaps we will see what buildings they're planning on building. All I'm asking for is transparency from the developer and the city. How many buildings? How many stories? How many doors? Even if it's not exact. I mean, they've been working on it for 3 years. I'm sure they have a relatively concrete figure in their heads. So that's all I'm asking from the developers. But if they don't want to tell us, we would ask that you ask them so that everybody knows. Thank you, and the citizens are counting on you. Have a great evening.
Merci pour votre
Thank you
présentation.
for your presentation. We're going to ask the representative from Quest to come forward.
Monsieur le maire,
Your
chers
Worship, councillors, we are all together this evening to approve the subdivision plan at 49 Heathrow, including the number, the placement of of Janica Street and Murray Street, as well as the placement of the LPP. At the last council meeting on May 23rd, many requests were raised by residents from Bouchard Street related to the subdivision plan I'm proposing. The residents are asking the city to close the extension of Janica Street and also requesting the developer to add a buffer zone, a green buffer, as well as to reduce the height of the apartment buildings. With regard to the closing of Janica Street, I talked to Marc Mélenchon and his experts to answer that request. With regard to adding a buffer zone and reducing the height of the apartment buildings, I'll come back after having presented the dynamic of the Bouchard Street over the last several years. We know that Dieppe Boulevard is the main artery that the city depends on for years to come. We see this in the presentation. All the points with the stars are essentially developments which are currently underway or have been underway in the last few years along Dieppe Boulevard. When you drive along the boulevard, you can clearly see the number of lands currently under preparation for residential and commercial development. We can see here the corner of Dieppe Boulevard and Melançon on the left, and we can see the site, the lands that are developed by Guy Bouchard, and on the bottom at right, another land, which is where the fire station will be. Much development is happening in the sector. To name some of them, we think of a 60-unit building at 1255 Boulevard Dieppe near Fox Creek Golf Course and Place Bonvie, 95 apartments at 1260 Dieppe Boulevard, as well as the number of buildings along Cannon and Kedgwick Streets, which are all near Bouchard Street. You can see them here on the left. You can see what's been developed and the other two developments that will come up later on the right. These buildings, multi-residential buildings, were built by Guy Bouchard, the same one who sold the land to the residents who are here tonight. Secondly, our property is owned for a density multi-residential with an allowed height of 6 floors and 7 for a different zone. What I answered to many real estate agents and others who have called me to find out what our intentions are. In all cases, we were being called to find what the extent of the proposal was and what we were going to build before they put in a proper a purchase offer. We have always been very clear. Thirdly, when we looked at the property line, we see that all the houses cut down the trees until the boundary property line, leaving no boundary, no buffer there. Shouldn't there be a responsibility to protect our own property and our own private lives without depending on others? Is it reasonable for me as a developer to expect my neighbors ensure privacy to my residents? I was requested at the last council meeting if it would be possible to preserve trees along the boundary line. It is very relevant to ask the question, would it have been possible for residents to preserve their trees along their boundary lines when they built their homes? Also, let us note that 9 of the 11 owners were bought 249 days after the date we bought our land. You can see here in this image where the stars are, the 9 properties out of the 11 that are adjacent to our property that were bought on average 249 days after we bought our property. I wonder how the residents there missed the fact that this subdivision was in full development mode. And you can see this on the Service New Brunswick site. It is clear here that we're seeing the NIMBY phenomena by residents who are established in their neighborhood, which is under growth. A more rapid growth, true, which has some reticence to change. The neighborhood dynamic is based not on feelings, but on facts. These facts show a high demand for multi-residential properties near services like grocery stores, Good Life, NB liquor stores, and other of its ilk. These requests are made by people like you and me, the professionals who are at the beginning of their lives and who want access to young families who are in transition, who will eventually buy their own homes, seniors who want to age in community, and people who come from outside the region who are choosing Dieppe as a place where it is good to live. The subdivision plan meets with the requirements of the bylaw and also the planning board. As a local developer, we have always been good neighbors with the citizens of Dieppe, and we want to remain good neighbors. The city of Dieppe is very dear to us, and we want to continue to contribute to the community while working respectfully with all interested stakeholders. So I ask you to approve the plan that is being presented tonight, considering that later we'll continue to work in good faith with the community as we have done previously in other projects. There are many studies that remain to be done with our consultants in architectures and civil engineering in order for us to be able to confirm the exact number of trees, the height of the buildings that are going to be built along Bouchard Street. However, we have heard the concerns of our neighbors at the last meetings and the meetings that we have had over the past few days. So we have worked very hard with our architect, Martin Richard, who is here tonight, in fact, in order to find solutions to calm these worries. Considering that these studies of consultants allow this, we share our intention to add a buffer zone along the boundary property line, which will extend to 9 meters. This buffer zone will preserve the private lives, the privacy of those who live in the zone. We will plant additional trees and in condition that the residents who are here tonight plant the same number of trees in their own backyards. It is our intention to reduce the height of buildings adjacent to the 11 properties in zones A and B, as you see on the screen. The height would be down to from 6 to 4 floors, because the studies allow us to reduce the density to phases that are further away from single-family homes. So we therefore request that you look at the remarkable work that our team has done over the last 2 years to get to where we are today, to present a very well thought out subdivision plan. Yes, it is a plan which has many components, but it will be made out over several years, and we will be met with high quality standards, as many Quest projects have been in the past several years in Dieppe. Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. Thank you for both presentations. It is clear that Council will take into account all the things that have been mentioned this evening. Mr. Melançon, is there anything to add about the matter of the street as such? Yes. In 10.5.2, this topic will come back up again on the agenda. There will be a percentage by staff, and this will be shared with council and the public at that item on the agenda. And then the council will be able to make a well thought out decision. Thank you. Are there any other questions by the public? Anything new? Anything other about another topic? I don't want to go back over the same topics that have already been raised. However, if you have something that you would like to raise, good evening, Your Worship, Council. I'm Marc Baudouin. I'm a neighbor of one of the Quest projects on Amaro Street. My property neighbors some apartment buildings that were built. When my wife and I were approached by the developers, by Quest, they came to our home. This was before the property was prepared. They came to see us at home, to introduce us to their project, and to ask us if we had any questions or any issues that would be important for us to discuss with them. And the same thing happened as this presentation that was done previously. In fact, we wanted to save the trees that we had on our property. Our properties between Amiro and the marshland area. And it was very important for us to save the trees that were behind us. So they recognized and listened to us very carefully. And during the project, we were very impressed by their understanding when the work was underway. They were often there to help. Even in fact, I had a baby barn that I had to move because I happened to be on their property. So they moved it. They gave us some gravel to put underneath the baby barn. And in fact, they saved some trees that belonged to us, that did not belong to us, rather, but that were part of a property that we looked after over several years. They changed the orientation of the fence. So we were very pleased with that. They built a fence to separate the apartment building and our property. They gave us the nice looking side of the fence, and so we were very appreciative of that. Something else that was important for us, for my wife and I, they planted about some 15 trees. It just happened not too long ago. They were mature trees, in fact, so we were very happy with that. Our experience with them was good. Quest developers, we had a good experience with them, and it's something that continued. I'm still in contact with them, and there was some part of the foundation that was damaged, and they're looking after that for us. So I simply wanted to add, and be here as a citizen, to say that we had nothing but good experiences with the developer. Thank you very much. Thank you. On any other topic? Good evening. Just a clarification in 7.4, 7.5, 7.6, and then questions by members of the public. I can wait. I can wait to item 8. Yes, we follow procedure. Sometimes the mayor gets involved in different pathways. So we also have a presentation. The next presentation, 7.4, is another application for rezoning by Bonte Foods. The developers are here. And then I have 3 letters to add to the file for the rezoning application.
Good evening.
A little shorter, apparently. Good evening. I'm Barbara Ann O'Brien. I'm the president at Bonte Foods Limited. I'm here to talk about the reason why we're asking for the land that we just purchased beside us to be rezoned. Just a little bit of background on us. Our current building right now is approximately 66,000 square feet. We originally built in 1977 on that exact spot that we're on right now to provide donair meat. Interesting, I know, to only Greco donair restaurants. New markets were quickly established beyond this. Our volumes quickly really outgrew the space very, very fast. The building was expanded and upgraded many times. I've been with the company for 27 years and it's been through many expansions while I've been there. The face has changed, the inside has changed. But most recently in 2006, we purchased the brand Chris Brothers out of Halifax, Nova Scotia. I'm sure a lot of you see us on the many grocery store shelves around the city when we added deli meats to our SKUs. Since 2011, inside of our building has changed to focus just on meat production. So we closed our bakery, we closed our sauce production area, and we became just a meat plant. So in January 2020, the shares of Bonte Foods Limited were sold to an Ontario business owner who already owns multiple plants in Ontario. So we currently right now employ 145 local staff in our federally inspected BRCGS AA+ certificated facility. That's the highest rating that you can get for a federal food plant. So for our future plans, to ensure continued growth of our plant, we purchased the property ID. I'm not going to read all the numbers off, sorry, but it's the one located right beside us. Purchased that for expanding our building. But in order to do that, we have to have a rezoning. What we're asking for the rezoning for is for additional cold storage, freezer and cooler specifically is what we're looking for. In order for our expansion to move forward, the property ID that we just purchased, 00674416, it's currently zoned CS and we are requesting for it to be rezoned to IP. This property will be amalgamated, or we're asking for it to be amalgamated with our current property where our current land and building are located. Our site plan, architectural elements, and landscaping will be presented as requested by the terms that are put in place by the city, if accepted. Our initial sound study was done from the top of the roof and the ground level to ensure that no noise disruption to the neighboring school. That was one of the concerns when we presented last time. All setbacks to the water course, which are located on that, are respected, so our building won't go beyond the size that we're allowed to build on. And why do we need this rezoning? It's important to us because we've experienced double-digit growth in the last 3 years. There's a known lack of other land available around us, and the maintenance of our current volume and any new growth are impossible without us expanding. This land represents our only option for growth in the city of Dieppe, and we're a local company. We want to remain this way. Our commercials all say it, we're Atlantic Canada's deli. We're proud to be in Dieppe and we'd like to keep it that way. So that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Question de la part des membres du Conseil.
Questions by councillors?
Aucune question?
No questions?
Good job. And then we'll move to the next one. Le prochain item.
The next item
L'audience publique
is the public hearing,
pour la modification
amendments
de l'arrêté. Alors,
for the municipal development plan and zoning bylaw. So 7.5, I'm sorry, 7 point, yes, right, that's right, 7.5. The public hearing amendments, municipal development plan and zoning bylaw. Mr. Landry. Yes, good evening, Your Worship, councillors. Thank you. So this evening, I'm here to do the presentation for the public hearing to amend the municipal development plan and zoning bylaw and the request by Bounty, the application by Bounty Foods. So for this presentation, we'll come back with the calendar for critical dates, the description of the project, the amendments that are being proposed, and what we should be thinking about when it's presented to the planning board. So today, this is the public hearing. We had the public presentation on May 8th. The planning board will be heard next Wednesday, June 21st. So all the elements will be available so we can make a decision on July 10th. So the property is adjacent to the existing plant of Bonte Foods. It's on Champlain Street. There's the school of Mathieu Martin, which is not too far away. So for the site perspective, you can see the property in question where the zoning would be amended. You have Bonte Foods plant, the schools, and Industrial Street and Rue Champlain are also indicated. For the context of the project, you see that it is the expansion of the Bonte Foods plant, which is behind. It is neighboring stream and other trees, but does not touch them. There's a buffer zone, which is 30 meters from the stream. It's the watercourse along the edge does not go, the expansion does not touch that watercourse edge. You have here the buffer zones and all the information. So the amendment proposed to this plan is to modify the generalized use map from commercial to industrial. With regard to the bylaw, it would move from CS to IP, amendment of the zoning map. IP is an industrial park. For the various items to think about, and this was based on the presentation last time, and they will be presented to the planning board as potential conditions that could be established if we go ahead with the application. So initially, you see here the facade with various architectural additions, which would add to the commercial aspect of Champlain Street. It's not necessarily an industrial park as such. And then other terms and conditions like the amalgamation or the front of the property to limit usages so that there are no accessory, secondary, or other usages that happen along Champlain Street, and to limit any uses in the increase which to the current uses of the plant, so light industry with the current production of the plant, which includes processing and storage. So there would be no further activities allowed in the industrial zone that would be allowed because of this increase, as well as other criteria like a sound study and the landscaping. Thank you, Mr. Landry. Mr. Melançon, were any comments received? Yes, we received 3 letters. So I will read them because this is required. So there's a letter from Mathieu Martin. I'm writing to inform you of our concerns related to the proposed rezoning of Bonte Foods Limited as presented by the Municipal Council on May 8th, 2023. Mathieu Martin School, which celebrates its 50th anniversary this year, is located near the company in question. As an established educational institution, It is likely to continue to serve the people of Dieppe for many years to come. The Parents' School Support Committee of École Mathieu Martin wishes to ensure that students and teachers can enjoy the school and its facilities without fear of excessive noise, spills, airborne emissions, or any other inconvenience that may arise from an industrial establishment. It is understood that the staff do not wish to oppose the development of this established Dieppe. It is for this reason that the PSSC requests that the rezoning be limited to the activities and emission levels of the company making the request, i.e. food production, so that the sale or restructuring of the company does not permit an increased level of pollution, noise, water, air, soil, etc., or activities having a negative impact on nearby properties and occupants. We thank you in advance for your consideration of request. The members of the Parent School Support Committee of École Mathieu Martin. We wish to tell you of our partial objection to the proposed rezoning of Bonté Foods Limited as presented to the Municipal Council on May 8, 2023. Mathieu Martin School, which celebrates its 50th anniversary this year, is located near the company in question. As an established educational institution, it is likely to continue to serve the people of Dieppe for many years to come. The Parent School Support Committee of École Mathieu Martin wishes to ensure that students and teachers can enjoy the school and its facilities without fear of excessive noise, spills, airborne emissions, or any other inconvenience that may arise from an industrial establishment. It is understood that the PSSC does not wish to oppose the development of businesses established in Dieppe. It is for this reason that the PSSC requests that the rezoning be limited to the activities and emission levels of the company making the request, i.e. food production, so that the sale or restructuring of the company does not permit increased level of pollution, noise, water, air, soil, etc., or activities having a negative impact on nearby properties and occupants. We thank you in advance for your consideration of request. The members of the Parent School Support Committee of École Mathieu Martin. We write this letter to confirm that there will be no access, direct access, than there is if the new development is what is proposed. We are in agreement. We want to ensure that the part of the property which is not to be used will be not changed again. This is corresponds by John McManaman, Build to Thrive. Those are the three letters that we have received so far. Thank you. Are there any questions? If there are any questions by members of council, Councillor Le Boutelier. Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I don't know if we did this, but it's a question of information. That is to say, this lands between the two. Who owns that? Is it Bonté Foods? Is a shareholder, owner related to that land? Or is it someone completely different? It is someone else. I think that was the last letter that we received. The letter which was just received is the owner of that property. Thank you. Questions? Councillor Lantagne. Thank you, Your Worship. One question, I think it had been addressed at the last meeting, but just to make sure, with regard to the concerns that we heard in these letters from the school support, the parent school support, are we sharing, when we talk about air, water, sound pollution that would affect the school? I know it was limited to other information that we received. There won't be any of that, but are we protected? Are there measures in place in order to ensure that in any near future it should change, that it would come back here to council? Yes, in fact, what is proposed and will be studied by the planning is to limit uses to what is specifically proposed. So in a case like this, if it's passed with these kinds of conditions, if there are any different uses, you have to come back to council to amend the conditions. I consider it's important that we comply with those issues regarding pollution. Thank you, Mr. Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. Pardon my ignorance, but could you change zoning and add conditions that you sell the plant later on, that you could only use this for food processing? Can we add that type of condition?
Des usages dans les
When we add uses in the conditions, yeah, we can be very broad or we can be very specific. It depends on what we want to impose as conditions, but yes, it is possible. Thank you. Your Worship, with support and the agreement of the owner, that then it's a lot easier if he agrees with the conditions proposed. Councillor Godbout, are we waiting? Are we expecting to have correspondence from the other school that is even closer to the property before the PAC session? We have the principal from Mathieu Martin, but what about the Carrefour L'Acadie? Did we not hear from them? We haven't heard anything. I did contact with somebody at the district to make sure that it was sent to the appropriate person, but then I didn't contact the schools directly afterward. But we were contacted by the District Francophone Sud. It's just between. I just want to facilitate things between PAC. Monsieur, Mathieu Martin responded, but perhaps the parent committee didn't. But perhaps, I mean, we should, if we should maybe follow up, but that would be helpful for the PAC as well before, just to follow up. I mean, it's their volunteer committees, so we don't want to presume that they have the same comments as the parent school support committee from Mathieu Martin. Thank you. No further comments. So thank you for your presentation, Mr. Landry. And we'll move on to next item, which is 7.6. 7.6? 7.6. Yes, we're at 7.6 for the tree bylaw. Your Worship, Alexandre Duchamp is going to give us a summary of all of the correspondence we received on the tree bylaw. And we tried to gather all of the comments as best we could in this presentation. Good evening, Your Worship, councillors. As Marc mentioned, we're going to give you a comment of the comments received. I'm not going to read them entirely, but I will try and highlight the main points that were raised by the people who participated in the consultations. But first of all, I'd just like to remind you of how this all started and where we're at today. The council wanted to regulate tree cutting since 2020. There was a consultation in 2021. A consultant worked with the different municipality services to make recommendations. This was presented at a public session, and then it was during the pandemic. So of course there were restrictions, but it was presented, and the Dieppe dialogue was opened. And the public, as well as the developers, were invited to comment during this consultation. We received 136 responses on a Dieppe dialogue. Most were in agreement to require a minimum number of trees per residence and to insist to require a tree study before issuing a building permit. And so here we are a year later with this draft bylaw that was preceded by another consultation period. 39 people took the time to read the bylaw or to get information and to share their comments with us. So we'd like to thank them for that. So just to come back to the recommendations, there were 3 recommendations to allow the city of Dieppe to achieve its objectives. First of all, to adopt a permit system that would apply to the whole community, to proceed with a tree study before issuing permits, and to take protection measures to protect trees, which led us to develop the objectives of the bylaw as drafted, to ensure sustainable development for the city, its population, to include trees in the planning projects to encourage the protection of our trees of interest and woodlots, and to require the replanting of trees as necessary, as this becomes a foundational piece for our approach towards protection of the trees and other environmental measures. This will allow us to take enlightened decisions as well as improve our progress towards the elimination or reduction of heat islands. In summary, as I mentioned, we received 39 comments, 19 in French, 20 in English. Most were in favor. There were a number of yes buts, but I'm here to try and this evening to answer these buts, but there were some concerns, some objections on different aspects of the bylaw. I think everybody wants to protect trees, I think, but everybody has a fear in how it's going to affect them personally. And I'll try and clarify certain points. One of the comments that often came up was the requirement of a buffer zone. We considered this in the bylaw, but there are risks in doing so, and we could see them in the projects today where buffer zones were preserved. Trees become dangerous. It's up to the city to ensure their maintenance behind private homes, and this is one of the reasons for which we did not include that requirement. We also have to take different conditions of hills or draining conditions, which make it very difficult, or the bylaw might not be sufficiently flexible to allow all of this. So we need to the tree study will identify the best choices for tree conservation and for paths and parks and LPPs, as well as wooded areas or mature trees to be preserved. We want to share this responsibility, that it not only be the city to maintain trees on these properties. Now, the application of the bylaw, questions, a certain number of questions were asked. Why does it only apply to the urban boundary? Why doesn't it apply outside? Well, it's more and more important to have green areas, but especially in the high density areas, these are the populations that are going to suffer from heat islands more so. One of the objectives of the bylaw is to really uh, ensure green spaces in these environments, and also to give us the means to apply measures where there are no trees currently. And there will be no cost for dead trees if they're dead, diseased, or dangerous. So, I mean, sometimes, you have to cut a tree, but there is no charge for dead, diseased, or dangerous trees. And as I said, it's a collective responsibility to maintain these trees. And this is why we decided that we would apply this to large territories as well as on private lots and single family dwellings as well, to maintain the protection of trees from the beginning of the chain, where we have these large subdivision projects where a developer might make all sorts of efforts to maintain trees, but then it's subdivided into lots where he can no longer control it, and people would cut the trees. So that doesn't make sense either. Different municipalities that we consulted talked about the loss of trees on their private lots, especially in the municipalities that are fully developed. So it's important that we really include the cutting of trees on private lots. Now, in the rural area, we've talked about it already. It was identified that it's not as much of an emergency and it's not as urgent. There are larger lots. There's a certain culture of maintaining trees. Lots are larger. So, but there still remains to do a complete assessment of the situation once the bylaw has been launched. Now, there were a number of questions on the education about going with the carrot rather than the stick, but the objective is to develop education and information tools for residents, but also to offer them professional tree care services, people who could go and advise and support projects and help people make their decisions. We'd also like to enhance the planting programs, as we mentioned, and we want to continue to cooperate with experts in other municipalities and experts in best practices in order to conserve the greatest number of trees possible in an urban setting. And to wrap up, I'd like to explain how we're going to manage all of this. Well, there will be a review process. And of course, we're going to analyze the bylaw throughout the application period, and we're going to report in a maximum of 18 months to evaluate and modify, to amend the bylaw if necessary. If it really doesn't work at all, we need to amend it or change it, we want things to continue to work. So we will review it and report. So the municipalities that we consulted provided adjustments throughout the first 10 years. So we're at a first stage. This isn't the last stage, of course. We're going to have a new element to allow us to analysis other policies through this bylaw. And we're going to look on how we can integrate the policy Z1, that was the tree code, to make sure that we don't lose sight of a certain element. Now, in closing, we don't have a miracle cure here. It will not cover all possible cases, but we have an ambitious starting point and a great idea for our community. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Turgeon-Roy, thank you. Just a clarification. You said at the beginning that there are some yes buts. There's buts in there. People are in favor, generally speaking, though. So in 18 months, I know we will need data in order to evaluate if the bylaw is working, if it's doing what we hoped it would. But when you said it's a maximum 18 months, we could do it much earlier, right? It'll be an ongoing evaluation, in fact. Well, yes, but the objective is to be able to work within the bylaw during a year and a half and to analyze it correctly to see how it affects different projects. But I mean, if it puts, uh, if it really stops everything, then we will be back here within a few weeks. Any other councillors? If not, thank you very much for your presentation. And we'll move on to item number 8. Questions by members of the public. And for once, I can say, is there somebody amongst the great numbers here? Usually I say that and it's an empty space in front of me. Good evening. Good evening. My name is Charles Poirier. I am a developer here in Dieppe and in Moncton. I'm a developer of residential projects. I'm owner of a number of lots here in Dieppe. Most of them are wooded, and we try to maintain them that way. But in spite of all of this, I have some concerns regarding certain points of the tree code. And I want to make sure that as councillors, you are aware of how it's going to operate day to day, starting tomorrow, let's say. Part 19 of the code gives a formula for planting of trees. And it's very similar to the Moncton bylaw. It's even more ambitious in that if you build a street, you have to plant a tree every 10 meters. That's the same as in Moncton. There will be an additional tree for each house, so 50% more than in Moncton. If it's a semi-detached, it would be 2 trees, so it'll be twice the number of Moncton. So you can be proud of working harder than Moncton to save your trees. But it's not so much there that my concerns lie. Is mostly what I call the penalties or fines, which is under part 20, section 20, that says that as well as the trees that are be planted under section 19, when you cut a tree of interest, it shall be compensated. And it doesn't matter where it is located on the property. So Just imagine a new resident just bought a wooded lot. He's going to go obtain a building permit. He's given a building permit. He asks for a tree study and discovers that where the house and the driveway and maybe a deck and a backyard is going to be, there are 5 trees of interest. Well, that will require 20 replacement trees. And the cost of replacing a tree is $500. So all of a sudden, this person ends up with a $10,000 bill. And it's not unreasonable, you know, as everybody does, that if you want to build a house and have a backyard, have a driveway, you know, somewhere where the tractors and backhoes can work around the foundation, there isn't much room left around a property that is 75 by 100 feet. So there's good chance that they will have to cut trees of interest. And it can't remain the way it is here. Well, this is just one house, and this is a major amount. Imagine an apartment building, or just think of me, if I want to build a new street, I need retention ponds, as the drainage plan requires, I need canals. In a subdivision, there might be hundreds of trees that have to be cut, and we don't have a choice. We asked for a building permit, we asked for the permission to build a street and lot. We need retention basins, and if there are hundreds of trees of interest that need to be cut, this represents astronomical amounts. It's not possible. I talked about it. I wrote to you on over the weekend, and I'm sorry I had to send a message to you on Sunday. I apologize for that, but it's such an important point that I want to make sure that you truly understand what you're requiring here. It's not just the subdivision project. People ask for buffer zones, and all of that is done within on land of public purposes or within the project. You're familiar with my projects. We try to leave green zones. We're proud of that. We it's dear to us. But somebody who wants to build a house, to have them face this, it's not right. Somebody who wants to build an apartment building, somebody who wants to have a subdivision plan, it's just too much. I suggested, as a response to this, that we talked about clear cutting and the loss of buffer zones, but nobody said, well, we don't want anybody to cut trees to build a house. But this is what's going on here. If we cut trees to build a house and there were trees of interest, we have to replace them. And the penalties, the fines, are just simply too much. If we say that these trees have to be replaced if they're cut outside of the development zone, outside of the zone that is required to build a house or the apartment building or for the subdivision, that makes sense. There you're talking about avoiding clear cutting. You're talking about avoiding cutting right up to the property line and leaving buffer zones. But the way it's written here, it's cutting anything. If you want to build a house, you have to cut trees. You can't have a development and build a house and not cut trees unless the trees were cut in advance. And nobody wants to do that. But in spite of that, that's what will be that's who the ones who are going to be rewarded are where it's been clear cut. They're the ones who are going to be rewarded. Those that have left trees, they're going to be penalized. So you have to remember that. You have to understand what that represents. Something else that bothers me in this, another section that I'd like to draw your attention to is section 21. This is in order to reward those who leave wooded areas or green areas. And there's a word that bothers me here in sections 19 and 20, where we require trees, it says that trees must be replaced, must be replaced. But in 21, where we talk about a possible credit in order to leave green zones, it says maybe we'll give a credit. And it's a little difficult to find what's right here. You say you must, but then if we do leave trees, then it may give us a credit. So it might be just a typo. I certainly hope so. But if you're going to ask for something on the one hand, then I think you should reward that behavior on the other if they conserve wooded areas. I'm a little nervous, I have to admit, because I saw people cut, and I don't necessarily think that we should cut all trees, but if this bylaw is adopted as is, then it's punishing everybody. It's punishing somebody who just wants to build a house. It's really important that you think of that and that you clarify that you're certain of what you're doing. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Thank you. Thank you. I see Mr. Trichon-Savard's pencil was busy jotting notes. So I'm sure that he or staff will send us ideas if there are other suggestions, but we do recognize that for us, it is the time to act. And I think everybody agrees on that. And I think generally speaking, we're all reasonable people and we're familiar with the challenges, but at the same time, it's time to act. And once it will be in place, perhaps it might be easier to amend it if we see that it's necessary based on the experience that we'll gain over the next few weeks, months. Well, Mr. Truchon said the same thing. He said, if we need to be back here in 2 weeks, we will. But, maybe we could take 2 weeks and sit down together and make sure everybody understands each other first. Well, that's another option. We could consider that. But for now, I think council's wish is to adopt this municipal bylaw and to really start to start living with it. In the past, we've experienced other types of activity, and we asked our developers to act. And at the end of the day, once it was implemented, it wasn't the end of the world either. And I'm talking about 2012 to be more specific. I think we were both at the same table at the time. And we still came up with a situation that was easier to swallow than we had thought it would be on both sides of the table. Well, yes, and I didn't mention that, and without going into the details, the drainage plan and the three-step building permit and the tree code, they're going to hurt each other. You can't raise a house, level a property, and maintain all of the trees. But just be careful. If you have to adopt something this evening, if you allow me to ask, just add a couple of works to section 20 that says trees of interest cut outside of the zone approved for the project. You're giving a permit to somebody, you're giving them a license to build a home on the one hand, and you can't say on the other hand, well, if you cut 5 trees down, you have to pay us $10,000. It's important. And if I can ask you as well, if you're going to say must in sections 19 and 20, well, in 21, you should use the same word to say that it must be given, not may. I can assure you, you know me. I don't come often. Most of our project respect trees, respect people, but the way it's written here, it's just not right. You really have to think about it and change it. Thank you for your comments. They are most appreciated. Please feel free. It's the same price. Good evening, Véronique Cormier. I live in Dieppe, Parachois Street. Thank you for having shared the developer's point of view with us, Mr. Poirier. But I wanted to add something on what you mentioned on trees of interest. Trees of interest are beautiful, large trees, but by interest, it might also mean that it's of interest to the public, to everybody. It will help everybody breathe purer air. And if we cut it, it will have a larger impact. So, well, yeah, there are some trees of interest. Well, yeah, it's because it's in everybody's interest and it's a private lot, perhaps. But at the end of the day, if there are no longer any trees left in Dieppe, it's everybody's problem. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship, councillors, Marc, and thank you for your many years of service. Congratulations. My name is Wilfred Savoie. I've been living in Dieppe for 20 years, and for the last year and a half, I've been renting at 245 Lafayette, which belongs to Quest. I've been following the development project on Bouchard Street with great interest, and I thought it useful to come and share my history with the Quest as a resident. My wife and myself are amongst those who were happy in our homes, but it became more and more difficult to maintain it as we got older, which led us to an apartment. After the early adaptation period, we realized that an apartment life can be just as rewarding as a single family home if they look after you as tenants. I'd just like to mention how much we appreciated having a choice of apartments here for people like us, people who were looking for a new life in order and peace peace of mind. We chose Quest because we weren't familiar. We didn't know them at the time, but they welcomed us, and we haven't regretted anything since. The personalized service is excellent. They are very nice people, and between you and me, they do everything in their power to meet our needs as clients. And I don't mean that it's the only company that offers good services. I just wanted to say that we are happy to have chosen this company. And when the 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 team are always very accommodating and respectful towards us. They are a local company and they really focus on client service. And I trust them completely. Now, I would like to encourage you to continue the dialogue between this municipality, the residents, and Quest in order to come up with a solution that is fair to all. These are not easy problems. People in the neighborhood, of course, are not happy, but the Quest offers an essential service for a large number of people of our society, including my wife and myself. And we're lucky to be able to live in one of their buildings. And I think it's beneficial to all that Dieppe maintains its reputation as a city where it's great to live and work. Thank you for your attention.
OK, je voudrais rappeler à tout le monde que l'item.
And I'd just like to remind you that
Question du public. Alors,
item number 8 on the agenda is questions from the public. Does anybody have questions by members of the public? We did receive a question, Your Worship, through the website of the municipality. It's a question in two parts. The first part, by using Dieppe Boulevard, my wife and I were shocked to see how much clear cutting there had. It was very unfortunate to see these wooded lots lose all their trees. Are you going to insist that the developers stop clear cutting? Is there a plan to plant the equivalent of the trees lost? Otherwise, are you going to develop one? So the bylaw is there. Second question, are the real estate project, which leaves very little green space around buildings, and the buildings, there's going to be parking around the buildings. That's all. There doesn't seem to be any green spaces, no community gardens, no trees, no shade. That we should have a better green spaces, a better quality of life. Or is the city going to lose quality of life and beauty? I thought that we were further along in development and Margaret Street.
Je pense que ces deux points-là font partie intégrale de
Oui.
qu'est-ce que les
I
sujets se
think
sont.
these two items are part of the topic we're discussing this evening. Thank you. One last chance if you have any questions. Good evening, Your Worship, members of the council. I will have a question, but I also want to make a statement and congratulations on the tree bylaw. There's no doubt about that. Someone mentioned that all the property owners along Bouchard Street had lost their trees, had not kept any trees on their property. I would have liked to keep mine, but another developer came to my home in May of 2022 and believed that there were trees that should not be there rather, and clear cut all the trees, took them all down. We're trying to resolve this because first of all, there was he trespassed on my property, had no permission to cut those trees, and they were all mature maples. So at the outset, where we started from, and I asked my builder, the contractor said we had to cut some trees, but he had taken, so he was going to put the house on land and the trees are going to be toward the rear of the property. So with regard to the tree bylaw, I know this is all new to us and I congratulate council. Naturally, there will be some issues and some experience. And for my part, Your Worship, I think that the developer wants to put trees behind our homes, then I'll match along that 75 feet. That won't bother me in the least. And so I hope that for Bouchard Street, that you will have heard our comments. It's not much, it's not very much at all. And so I'm asking you to seriously look at these two requests, because in fact, there are two requests for Janica Street and see how we can live within, respecting both projects. And, we don't want to quarrel with the developer, but we'd like these things taken into consideration and that are taken into consideration how we live in Dieppe. Thank you. I'm Emmanuel Duguay. I'm a resident of Bouchard Street. We kept as many trees as we could behind, and our backyard faces Keith Street. My question is the bylaw going to come into effect when? Will it take into consideration the clear cut that happened last week? Okay. It's a little funny that from one day to the next, we ask if that could be taken into consideration because we don't have trees anymore.
Essentiellement, le processus
In fact,
de mettre en place
the process of
l'arrêté
implementing a new
ça demande beaucoup de
municipal
temps.
bylaw requires a lot of time,
Suivi la cédule qu'on
and we
suit,
followed the schedule that we had to follow for that purpose.
choisi de
The developer
ce qu'ils ont fait.
did what they did.
Avait les mains de liées comme
Our hands were tied,
je pense que je sens que peut-être
but I
dans les discussions
feel
sur
like
place quand on écoute
in the
les deux
discussions
parties ce
we've
soir,
heard and when we hear both parties this evening that at least there has been
ce qui va pas
a,
certainement pas tout réparer, mais
a change is going to happen that may not
dans la bonne direction.
repair everything, but lead us in the right direction. We hope so. We planted a lot of trees and we're quite ready to plant more if we get some help. Thank you. Thank you. Your Worship, to add to the question, the developer also has to put forward a plan, a landscaping plan. So once it's done, they have to landscape all around their site, and that includes planting trees, landscaping, and this plan has to be presented to the city and as part of the analysis, which is another step after this. So public lands and public streets will be confirmed. So there is another landscaping plan that is associated with this subdivision development. Having said this, let's move on to item 9, which, well, this has been kind of boring for many of you. This is the adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting held May 23rd, 2023. Who would move the adoption? Moved by Councillor Turgeon, seconded by Councillor Thibodeau. On the question. No questions? All those in favor of passing or of adopting the minutes of May 23rd will say aye. Against, nay.
Le procès verbal de la réunion ordinaire.
So the minutes of the regular council meeting of May 23rd are passed as presented. Item 10.1, motions, memorandums, and nominations. Item 10.1, Mr. Masson. Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, everyone. And thank you for your kind words at the outset of the meeting. It was a bit of a surprise. And yes, I do. And all the members of our team adore the work that we do here in Dieppe. For the first file, this is financial contribution request by the Multicultural Agency of the Greater Moncton area, known as MAGMA. A request was made to 3 municipalities to contribute and support the needs of asylum seekers. And many people are being carried here to our region into New-Brunswick. And these individuals need help once they arrive here. They have language issues and other issues when they come here. So here is a staff recommendation for a contribution of $6,000, conditional that the cities of Moncton and Riviere also provide the same contribution. We had done some partnership with both cities in the past, and so it's similar to this request. So we recommend that we accept a contribution of $6,000. Thank you. To read this resolution, Councillor Boudreau, please. Thank you, Your Worship. That Council accept, subject to the participation of the City of Moncton and Town of Riverview, to contribute a maximum of $6,000 to the Multicultural Agency of the Greater Moncton area to support the needs of asylum seekers, and authorize that this expenditure be defrayed from account number 1-2-20-14-2150, General Operating Budget, Corporate Affairs. I so move. Moved by Councillor Boudreau, seconded by Councillor Brideau. Pardon me.
Sur la question.
On the question.
Aucune question?
No questions.
Madame Le Boutier.
Councillor Boutillier. Thank you, Your Worship. It's just a question for information purposes. Recently, in the last month or so, there's no issue making this contribution of $6,000 for this wonderful organization. However, we made it known that the province of New Brunswick was the only province in Canada that does not contribute, had no specific funding for this. So my question was, is this a provincial responsibility or a municipal one? Or is it so urgent that it means we have to act? I think it's urgent and urgent in this case. So I'm wondering who has the responsibility for this. Your Worship and councillors, this is an excellent question. As I said in the memorandum, I'm sorry, we all know you, but maybe you should introduce yourself. Hello, everyone. I'm Amy Haché. I'm Director of Immigration Services for the City of Dieppe. I will be celebrating my first anniversary of working for the city. I've been working on many topics since last July in order to make sure that the City of Dieppe is welcoming and inclusive and reflects the diversity of our population. And so, yes, in fact, there's the whole matter of who is responsible. We work in cooperation with the provincial government and the IRCC at the federal level to see where financing can come from. Given that this matter is very urgent, the asylum seekers came very quickly to our area, and making application for funders can take time. These individuals, services, they're in vulnerable state, and in order to get the services, this is why the agency is looking toward municipalities. Some actions have been taken at the provincial level. A letter was sent by His Worship last month, if I'm not mistaken. So yes, there are actions underway looking for financing from other providers. Thank you. Thank you. Any further questions? If there are none, those in favor of the resolution will say aye. Against, nay. Carried as presented. Mr. Mélenchon, 10.2, a tender award, microsurfacing. Following a tender, 2 proposals were received. As a result of this call to tender, the councillor awards industrial cold milling $724,101 contract and $85,000 plus HST for engineering services to EXP services. For information to the public, microsurfacing is done on Alain Gillette Street, part of Chartersville Road, which is found between Amaro and Domaine Central, Vanier Street, which goes from Central to La Fleur Street, and it allows us to extend the useful life of asphalt. So there's our recommendation. Thank you. To read this resolution, Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. The Council award the tender for the project entitled 2023 Microsurfacing Various Streets to the lowest bidder, Industrial Cold Milling, a division of Miller Paving Limited, at the cost of $724,101 plus HST, authorize EXP Services Incorporated to undertake engineering services relating to said project at the cost of $85,000 plus HST, and further authorize these expenditures to be defrayed from account number 3-3-35-58-7603, General Capital Budget, Microsurfacing Program. I so move, Your Worship. Moved by Councillor Thibodeau, seconded by Councillor Godet. On the question. There being none, all those in favor of the resolution will say aye. Against, nay. 10.2.1 is carried. With regard to operations, 10.3.1, Mr. Mélenchon. Yes. I should have asked industrial street or microsurfacing is added to that previous amount. So the amount for the number of kilometers we're covering. So 10.3.1, further to a tender call to purchase an articulated loader. We received 3 offers to this call for tender. The council recommends ALP equipment at the cost of 598,087 plus HST pursuant to the proposal received last May 10th. So we recommend it for the general equipment purchase. Thank you. To read the resolution, Councillor Lantagne. Thank you, Your Worship. That council award the tender for the purchase of an articulated loader 2023 model JCB 407C for the operations department to Alpa Equipment Limited at the cost of $108,598.87 plus HSE pursuant to its proposal dated May 10, 2023, and authorize this expenditure to be defrayed from account number 3-3-20-12-7901, capital budget, general equipment purchase, public works. I so move, Your Worship. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Lantagne, seconded by Councillor Leboutillier. On the question, there being none, all those in favor will say aye. Against, nay. The resolution is carried as presented. At 10.3.2, oh, sorry, 10.3.2. Oh, well, let's talk about pickleball. Yes, for those who love pickleball, you will be delighted to see that a contractor has been awarded to Dexter Construction Company Limited at the amount of $1,373,100,000 plus HST and an amount of $80,000 for engineering services related to Englobe Corp. We received 3 proposals. After the call for tender, we underlined that with the size of the there was an over edge of the project, so we revised the project, which was not a significant change. And so before you have this proposal, and there's also authorization of a budget transfer to allow us to fulfill the project. So we are looking for approval for the reading of this resolution. Councillor Turgeon-Roy. Thank you, Your Worship. The council award the tender for the project entitled Pickleball Courts to the lowest bidder, Dexter Construction Company Limited, at the cost of $1,373,100 plus HST. Authorize Englobe Corp to undertake engineering services relating to said project at the cost of $80,000 plus HST, and further authorize these expenditures be defrayed from account number 3-3-70-12-7618, General Capital Budget, Recreation Plan, Pickleball. And the council authorized a budget transfer in the amount of $516,000 from the account number 7-4-20-12-8920, General Capital Reserve Fund, to account number 3-3-70-12-7618, General Capital Budget, Recreation Plan, Pickleball. I so move, Your Worship. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Rideau. On the question. Councillor Godbout, you have a question. Thank you, Your Worship. With regard to the budget, there were some changes that had been put forward, one of which was related to the water fountain, access to water. Are there alternative plans that can be used in the future to make sure that there is access for people who wish to remain hydrated? We'll ask Mr. Dubé, who manages this project, and ask him to answer the question. Good evening, Councillor. Yes, in this present case, in the AGL complex, there is a water fountain. Next year, we're talking about renovating the glass surface, the ice surface in Saint Anselme, and within the scope of that project, there will be some undertakings for the pickleball project. Did everyone understand that answer? Yes? Okay. Let me add that we're in discussion with the pickleball committee They're all informed of what measures we had to undertake, and we'll be choosing the measures that will be undertaken as well. Any further questions? Councillor Le Boutillier. Thank you, Worship. I've just had my question answered with regarding to AGL. Thank you. If there are no further questions, all those in favor of the resolution will say aye. Against nay. The resolution is carried as presented. This brings us to 10.3.3, a tender award with regard to sanitary services project. Where in Dover Park? Further to discussions and planning with the municipal council, it was necessary to provide sanitary services to our major parks. So further to a call for tender, various proposals were received under this initiative. So the staff recommends going with Windsor Construction Design Limited at the cost of $617,886.93 plus HST, and for engineering services to go with Englobe Corp in the amount of $30,000 plus HST, and that they authorize a budget transfer from a reserve fund. So this is for your consideration and approval for us to go ahead. To read this resolution, Councillor Boudreau. That Council award the tender for the project entitled Dover Park Sanitary Services to Windsor Construction and Design Limited at the cost of $617,886.93 plus HST. Authorize Englobe Corp to undertake engineering services relating to said project at the additional cost of $30,000 plus HST, and further authorize these expenditures be defrayed from account number 3-3-70-12-7617, General Capital Budget, Recreation Plan, Dover Sanitary. That Council authorize a budget transfer in the amount of $676,000 from account number 7-4-20-12-8920, General Capital Reserve Fund, to account number 3-3-70-12-7617, General Capital Budget, Recreation Plan, Dover Sanitary. I so move. Moved by Councillor Boudreau, seconded by Councillor Thibodeau on the question. Councillor Le Boutillier. Yes, thank you, Your Worship. In the details that have been put forward, so my question is this. The building which belongs to Soccer Dieppe, who have their operations there currently, does it belong to the city of Dieppe? And what is the future for that building? That's my first question.
Le centre Dover appartient à la ville.
Dover Center belongs to the city. Currently, as I explained in the memorandum, we had the building assessed, and it is in a terminal phase, if you will, and so that's why there's a transfer to Dieppe Soccer. And that building, what's going to happen with it? Do we have an idea? Or we're not there yet? We're not there yet. We're evaluating what measures we could take. That's where we're at now. And surely by the end of this year, we'll have an idea. Thank you. My second question is, part number 3 on page 50 of our guide. It states that this new space will be built. I have nothing against it. It looks good. I just want to understand, so we're going to build something combining sanitary services and a multi-purpose room, which mainly be used by Soccer Dieppe, but which can be used by municipality and other groups if there are events to be held. Does this mean that Soccer Dieppe, because soccer is not just 2 months a year, right? It's from May until September, October, I think. Well, for example, for the Imagine Festival or Kite Flying Festival, let's say we need a weekend or a few days or a week. These are accommodations that Soccer Dieppe is ready to provide to us with this multi-purpose room. So they, they take all their stuff out and then we come in with other things. No, that's not going to happen, but it's a space that can be used. That's what I wanted to understand, that they were comfortable with that sharing. Soccer Dieppe has been consulted. Thank you. Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Goodboo. Yes, thank you, Your Worship. As reading this, I want to thank the staff for having brought this project to fruition. I think since our first bus trip as newly elected council members 2 years ago, it seems like a big amount, but it means huge improvements. How can we have the 2025 Akati Games without having something like Dover Park and parents or families that have activities there over the weekend? I'm convinced that this will be of great service to citizens. It's a lot of research to make the right choice, and I really appreciate uh, staff efforts. Thank you.
Ça nous amène maintenant. Non,
No, oh, we didn't vote yet.
Voilà. Alors, ceux qui sont en faveur de
Okay,
la.
so all those in favor of resolution will say aye. Against nay. The resolution is carried as presented. 10.4, community development. Mr. Melanson. A moment ago, we talked about a pickleball field and a pickleball club. Now you have a protocol which clarifies the role of the municipality who owns the facilities and the role of the pickleball club with regard to programming and activities on the fields. So you have been made aware of all the elements involved, and we are looking to get signing authority of this memorandum of understanding and put it into effect later. Thank you. To read this resolution, Councillor Godet. Thank you, Your Worship. That Council accept the agreement between the City of Dieppe and the Club de Pickleball Dieppe for the period commencing on the date of signing of said agreement until the closure of fields in 2023. I so move, Your Worship. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Godet, seconded by Councillor Lantin on the question.
Aucune question. Alors, ceux qui sont en faveur de la résolution signifient par un
No
oui.
questions? All those in favor will say aye. Against nay. Carried as presented. 10.5, planning and development to set the dates for public presentation and public hearing. Mr. Melanson. Since January 1st, 2023, we have implemented what the white paper imposed on New-Brunswick. We have integrated a property, including some 800 people who are annexed to our beautiful city. And so we needed to review our municipal development plan and zoning bylaw. The team for the territory annexation project, since last fall, the team has been working with a consulting firm. We are very soon going to have a presentation. We will have it on June 26th here at City Hall, and another one will be held on September 11th, 2023. And we need a written date to go until October 2023. So this is an important step in this initiative in order to implement annex the municipal development plan and zoning bylaw for the territory annexation project. Councillor Brideau. Thank you, Your Worship. The Council scheduled a public presentation on June 26, 2023 at 7 p.m. at the Dieppe City Hall to present the amendments to the municipal development plan. That Council scheduled a public hearing on September 11, 2023 at 7 p.m. at Dieppe City Hall to present the changes relating to the zoning bylaw revision. That Council requests the written views of the Planning Advisory Committee and extend the deadline pursuant to subsection 1103 of the Committee Planning Act to October 10, 2023. I so move, Your Worship. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Brideau, seconded by Councillor Turgeon-Roy, on the question.
Sur la question, Madame,
On the question, Councillor Le Boutillier. Thank you, Your Worship. I was trying to understand, because we've seen the report, the report's been presented to us, but I just wanted to draw your attention to a couple of mistakes. So the difference, if you look on page 196, talk about regroupement de logement and GH, and on the page we're talking about DG, regroupement de logement. So it's a little typo, and I was a little mixed up. I wonder what the difference was. So I realized that it's probably just a typo, and maybe you could correct that, but I just wanted to draw that to your attention. Thank you.
c'est bien le cas, Monsieur Girard.
Thank you. Mr. Girard? Yes, it's noted. That was the consultant's report, so we will take note of the comment. Thank you.
Bien.
Thank you. No further questions? No questions?
Non, il y a pas d'autres questions. Alors, ceux qui
No
sont
other
pour la
questions? All those in
résolution,
favor of the resolution will signify by saying aye.
par un non. La résolution est
Contrary, nay.
adoptée.
Carried as presented.
Alors, au 10.5.2,
10.5.2, Mr. Melanson.
Afin de s'assurer
Yes, in order to make sure that councillors have all of the information they need, as a number of questions were asked, and Councillor Le Boutillier had also mentioned she had a conflict of interest, so we will give her time to withdraw.
Alors, avant de prendre votre décision, voici des explications additionnelles.
But here are some additional
Dossier par
explanations, and following analysis, I would ask Angela Spencer, who is responsible for the sustainable development and urban safety, to make a presentation for council and the public.
bonsoir.
Good evening, Your Worship, Mr. Melanson, councillors. I'm just waiting for the presentation to come up on the screen. So thank you for this opportunity to present some clarifications on the request, the application, and the process. First of all, the New Brunswick Planning Act requires that municipalities adopt a municipal plan, and the bylaws, such as the zoning bylaw, are to add to this municipal plan. The municipal plan, that is also a bylaw, will establish a long-term vision for the city that will guide the growth and development in the city. The bylaw will help to the implementation of the municipal law by adding specifics. The zoning bylaw will divide the territory into 23 different types of zones. A complete review of the bylaw is conducted every 10 years, the last one being in 2015. The territory, the land that we're looking at this evening, is mostly R4. There's also a part of it that is CMP, just along Dieppe Boulevard. In an R4 zone, this is mixed residential zone, but high density, where you could find row housing, multifamily dwellings, or daycares. Note that this lot has held this zoning since 2008. A subdivision plan, such as the one that being asked for approval this evening, will divide a property into a number of other territories and will create new roads and public services, such as land for public purposes. Just a reminder, here are the responsibilities and the decision-making power of the different stakeholders. First of all, staff must analyze the application. Following that, the Planning Advisory Committee, the PAC, will approve or not the variances requested. In this case, there's a variance as to the width of the street, and then the PAC has to make recommendations to the municipal council on the creation and the location of public roads, the names of the roads, and the location of a land for public purposes. I'd like to give you a summary of the analysis conducted by staff in this file. The connection to Janica Street is necessary for the following reasons. Bouchard Street is longer than our standards for with one single access. We want to ensure everybody's safety in case of a mandatory evacuation and avoid problems like we saw in the news in Halifax recently. That's why Janica was already built to the back part of the properties along Bouchard Street. This will also allow a better connection for water and sewers. There's also the potential density of the new subdivision. This connection will also facilitate the snow removal equipment and so on, as well as traffic. We know that certain decisions of the past do create challenges today in terms of connectivity. We want to make sure that we do follow best practices today, best practices. Now, for land for public purposes, we recommend that it remain where it is being proposed for the following reasons. All of the residents of the neighborhood will be able to take advantage of it because it will be centralized. It will allow better um, connections to the trail system on Verte Street and the future connection to Dieppe Boulevard. And the retention pond is closest to the lowest point of the development and we could make an interesting development around that that would be accessible to everybody in the neighborhood. Now, in terms of the site plan, according to the New Brunswick Planning Act, it is not required for this stage of the application. It is only required once the developer will ask for a development project and a building permit that will be assessed by staff in order to make sure it's compliance. So in summary, here are the 3 points that need to be approved by council this evening: the creation and the location of public roads, the name of the roads, and the location of the land for public purposes. Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. So even though the residents have the ability to share their concerns, I think, and we have understood their concerns, municipal council has the duty to listen to them. Of course, that is your role here this evening and through the last few weeks. But the Planning Act and these bylaws Z9 are legal documents, and the 3 points on the screen must be taken into consideration by councillors. Now, you have to be aware of the full file and also be aware of the developers point of view. And so I would allow you to discuss it now and make your decision according to your discussions. Who would like to read the resolution? Councillor Brideau. Thank you, Your Worship. That Council accept the Planning Advisory Committee's recommendation relating to the acceptance of the Quest Capital Incorporated subdivision amending tentative plan, which provides for the creation and location of Origine Street, the extension and location of Janica Street, the extension and location of Murray Avenue, as well as the location of land for public purposes. And I so move. Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Brideau, seconded by Councillor Godet on the question. Councillor Godet. Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question. On Janica Street, can we make it a one-way street that would leave, people could leave Bouchard Street but could not go in the other direction? Would that be possible? It's not something that staff was ready to recommend. Mr. Cormier had asked the question, but Mr. Cormier, well, thank you for the question. I have no comments for or against that decision. I think it would be more a question of something to ask the engineering department. It's not a problem for us. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, councillors. For us, it might depend on the development and how it advances in phases. If if there's no, it doesn't allow access. If it's one of the accesses to the one of the phases, we could leave it open. But if it's the only access, depending on the way that the phases move ahead, for us, of course, we can look at it. But for now, I don't really have a definitive answer to give you. Great, thank you. Councillor Prideaux. Well, I'd like to come back to Janica Street. We have no indication of whether or not it's going to be a main street, an important one, if it's going ahead or if it's not. People, nobody seems to be able to tell us if this street is actually going to be there. Well, of course, it depends on how the developer wants to phase the development. It's not, there aren't going to be 1,000 or 2,000 units built right at the beginning. So we haven't seen the plan either. We don't know the phases projected. For Janica Street, we don't know the developer's plans. In the longer term, it would seem that, and they mentioned it this evening, that they are proposing it now. As far as we're concerned, Janica was exists. It's there. It was asked for as soon as Bouchard Street was built. So it gives that, it gives onto the developer's property. Now for us, yeah, so it would seem that it's necessary, but in terms of us, no, I really don't have any further comments to make on that. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Turgeon-Roy. I have too many mics on at the same time. Thank you. Well, it comes back to what was just said. I have trouble voting on something like this. And we don't really know the scope, the division, the subdivision, where we're going with this. Yes, this will have a big impact on everything coming later, and I'm just not comfortable to make a decision or to vote in favor of this because I'm not clear. I understand that there are phases. I understand that. I get it. But the whole size and scope, the breadth and scope, what are the plans of the whole thing? But on the what? Well, all we see are the subdivisions. We don't know what's going on, how many doors, what will be the traffic. Your worship, if you can allow me 2 comments. This project and Origine Street will be the main connector road. This is what we see here. When these streets and all public streets and the names are given, the developer then finalizes their plans and the buildings. This has an impact on what will be finalized as the final project. The developer needs this information before investing money into the final plan. That's why this phase is necessary before they determine where the exact buildings will be, and as well as what the Quest spokesperson told us this morning, that there's a buffer zone of 9 meters, I think, along Bouchard Street, but that Janica is helpful not only for the Quest project, but it's also for public safety, people who live on Bouchard Street. People might not realize it, but when there is a situation and an unexpected incident, we have to have a second access point to get out. So in future, if we see that we can develop a one-way street, we've done it in the past elsewhere, well, we will assess that when it comes up. But in terms of the order of things this evening, we're not here to give an opinion on the street, or whether it's a one-way or a two-way. Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Spencer, no? Okay. Which brings me to Councillor Godbout. Thank you, Your Worship. I have several comments similar to the others, but I'll skip the ones that have already been mentioned. my concerns are on the location of the land for public purposes. This is a concern for me. The lack of a development plan is important for me in this case, and I understand that in a normal procedure, we don't need it, a normal process, but in a process in which we're trying to increase the densification, we haven't even seen of a scope that we haven't seen yet, that the number of units that we can see on a property, the lack of this development plan is difficult because we haven't had a chance to really reflect on this, to really think about how this. When I look at the municipal plan, and I've sat on the PAC during 9 years, and we talked a lot about densification and how it looks. But when we looked at the municipal plan, we were talking about integrating apartment buildings on available lots and so on. There was this concept of having a lot of different types of residences all integrated together in a certain territory. There was not a lot of discussion on this vision of having a number of apartment buildings all together on a certain property like is being proposed here. And for me, yes, this evening we're just being asked to for the creation of the Origin Street and the location of Janica Street and the acceptance of the tentative plan. But because of the lack of this general direction and the lack of discussions with staff, I've gone at the bylaws, I've looked at the municipal plan. There's so many things that say that that say yes, and others that are not necessarily that would not necessarily say yes. Sustainable development, for example, we're being asked to have a vision of the future. It's not as simple as just voting yes for these 3 points. If we look at the overall picture, I'm not sure it makes sense. I don't know. I'm not able to say yes. Now, secondly, the location of public streets, the issue of Janica Street. Yes, they raised some other areas. It's not a safety. We could have a terrible situation, emergency situation, but we could have something different than what is being proposed, maybe a one-way street as being mentioned. Now, and thirdly, the location of the land for public purposes near the retention pond. I don't know, maybe I don't know anything, but when you want to put in a park to allow my children to play right by a retention pond, when it's excluded from everything else. I mean, the retention pond is like a magnet for children, so the location of the land for public purposes should maximize the use of the territory, but doesn't really promote family living, family life. And perhaps it's because I haven't seen it. I maybe if I had the development plan in front of me, I would, but right now I don't see it. The location of the land for public purposes for me uh, is not, I have trouble seeing it as a good idea for families that will be living there, towards whom we also have a duty of ensuring the safety and an overall vision. So as much as we want to promote the development and densification, we have to do it in a way that will also promote our tendency in Dieppe and the fact that Dieppe is a great place to live and raise a family. So yes, for me, this is more than just a location of a land for public purposes. Well, in the document, there is an area that is mentions that the park would be in a central area, central to all of the buildings on page 272. And also, just to give you an idea of what it might look at like, there's a retention pond close to the park on Yvonne Street, and it's right close to the land for public purposes. Elements are there to make sure that it is safe and that it, but there's integration between the pond and the park, and we don't there's we don't want a retention pond like along Bourke Road. I mean, we want to dress them up, perhaps. We want to make people aware and integrate it with the nature and with the park. So there are elements, and when it's integrated with to the retention plan. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you, Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. In his presentation, Mr. Bourque made two requests, which I consider very reasonable. First of all, to have a buffer zone, 10 meters, and Mr. Courtois confirmed that they're ready to allow a 9-meter buffer zone. So I think that that's pretty close. And then the next request was to close Danica Street, Danica. And following all of the arguments that we've heard, I'm not sure that we should close it, but I do believe that we should make it a one-way street, and that would meet the needs. Now, like Corinne mentioned earlier, with no development plan in front of us, it's very difficult to approve it, even if we're just approving the streets. Yeah, but the streets, if we want it to become a one-way street, well, is that included in this, or I'm not sure. I would be ready to vote if it weren't for that, but there's nothing here for us. Thank you. Mr. Lantin? In terms of the one-way street, that's would be under the traffic bylaw. It would be under that bylaw. So if that's what staff, if everybody agrees, that's something we can certainly look at. Okay. I didn't feel that there was any objections to it. I'm trying to read in people's eyes and faces. Ms. Spencer, I just wanted to clarify, it was mentioned that the connection was necessary for safety. Yes, the connection is necessary, yes, for safety, but the one way or not, or two ways is not there. But and we want to avoid any decisions that we made in the past that could cause challenges in the future. So there, because of the density of the new sector, that connection with Janica Street is important, but for safety, but whether it's one way or two ways doesn't matter for safety. Councillor Lantin, thank you. I had a couple of points, but several of them have already been raised. I agree with everything that's been said so far. I have a question though. It was mentioned that there have to be two accesses for subdivisions. For the Quest, three access roads. So two get on Murray, one that goes out to Dieppe Boulevard, and the other one will go out on Keith. Well, okay, three access points, three access roads to the development. So I have no problem with that. What I would suggest, if it's a question of safety, for in case of fire or so on, I would suggest that it be a road reserved to emergency vehicles only. I don't know if we could do that, but I would like that to be considered in that there would be no traffic. People wouldn't be able to drive on those streets. It would be reserved for emergency vehicles only, or in case of emergency. And excuse my ignorance, perhaps this is completely ridiculous as an idea, but I just wanted to bring it up. And I'm not comfortable voting on this either because we're talking about a very large scale project, something that's never been seen in Dieppe and perhaps not in Moncton or in New Brunswick at all. So is it going to be 1,000 units, 2,000? We don't have the development plan, so it's very difficult for me. I agree with what was already been said. It's very difficult for me to make a decision on this evening. So those are the points I wanted to make. Thank you. Thank you. No other comments? Who would like to read the resolution? Oh, we've already read it. Okay. It was read by Councillor Brideau, and it was seconded by Councillor Godet. So You have the question. All those in favor of the resolution will signify by saying aye.
Contre, alors?
Opposed?
Alors, la résolution est...
The resolution is defeated.
L'item 11... Ali. Ah oui.
Oui, est-ce que vous pouvez aller récupérer Pascal Le Boutillier?
Could you go ask Councillor Le Boutillier to come back, please?
Alors, ça nous amène à l'item
Which
11.
brings us to item 11, municipal bylaws. 11.1, bylaw E-1, 2023, tree bylaw. To read the summary, who would like to read the summary? Councillor Godbout. Thank you, Your Worship. So, bylaw E-1, tree bylaw, pursuant to the authority vested in it by the Local Governance Act, SNV 2017, Chapter 18, the Council of the Municipality of Dieppe, duly assembled, enacts as follows: definitions, general conditions, section Part 2, generalities, Part 3, application. This bylaw applies to the entire city. Part 4, conditions. 1, boundary tree. 2, transferability of certificate of authorization. 3, certificate is valid for 2 years. 5, exemptions. Certain activities are exempt, and asking for a certificate of authorization, as well as projects that are completed and being assessed, or projects for which a permit was issued before the date of passing of the law. Part 6, prohibitions, no damage or destroy of a tree or its parts, including the roots, plant a tree on land owned by the city. 7, authorizations. Outside the urban boundary, the cutting of trees must be declared. Within the urban boundary, it is authorized by a certificate of authorization. Part 2, the application of process for a certificate of authorization. 8, application for a certificate of authorization. 1, any cutting or potential damage. 2, cutting more than 25% of the live branches of a tree. 9, Part 9 are the trees that are dangerous or create a risk. 1, emergency felling. Evidence must be given within 7 days. And 2, maintenance of authorized public roadways. Part 10, tree study. The tree study is valid for 18 months. List of requirements for a tree study. 11, persons authorized to provide a tree study. The tree study is produced by the city or by an arborist. If the applicant wants the services of the city, it's first come, first served. 12, the validation of the tree study. It needs to be validated and corrected as necessary. 13, false information from an arborist, process in case of false information. 14, consent. Must have the consent of the owner with when there are boundary trees. 15, issuance of a certificate of authorization. List of reasons that would allow the issuance of a certificate. 16, the conditions of the certificate. It may contain conditions that must be followed. 17, refusal of the application. A list of the reasons that would justify a refusal. 18, appeal process. The applicant may request an appeal within 15 days of receiving notice, and the appeal hearing shall be held within 16 days. Part 3, the creation of a housing, commercial, or industrial space, new street or project on vacant lot within the urban boundary. 19, minimum planting requirements. Whether or not trees are cut, the applicant shall plant a minimum of 1 tree per every 10 meters of new meters, or 1 new tree for every 10 meters of new street frontage. Compensation for trees of interest. If a tree is interest, it must be cut. It has to be compensated according to a ratio of the DBH. Part 21, conservation of wooded areas and trees of interest. The conservation of trees of interest or wooded areas of interest reduce the minimal planting of 1 tree per 100 meters of conserved wooded lot, and the conservation of a tree of interest identified in the tree study may reduce the number of trees to plant at the ratio of DBA. 22, calculation of planting trees. Any remaining fraction shall be considered as a planting tree. 23, other planting requirements. 1, to meet the requirements of the zoning or expansion Dieppe. 2, calculation of planting trees shall take into account trees required by the zoning bylaw or expansion Dieppe. 3, shrubs are not included. Part 4, other projects within the urban boundary. Part 4, replacement of tree cutting. If the cutting of a healthy tree is authorized, the replacement according to the size of the trunk, except where a minimum of 1 tree per 10 meters of street frontage remains. Trees between 10 and 29 centimeters DBH do not need to be replaced. 25, dead, diseased, or dangerous trees. In the case of a dead, diseased, or dangerous tree, the replacement is required. Part 5 and 26, conditions for planting trees. They must meet certain requirements according to the certificate. 27, prohibited activities. Even in possession of a certificate, certain activities are prohibited. 28, protective measures. The protective fence is a standard measure according to the DBH. 29, modification of protective measures. If work is authorized within the protected zone, conditions can be given. Restrictions within the protection zone. It is prohibited to store material in the protection zone. 31, display of the certificate of authorization, to display it at least 5 days prior to the cutting. 32, revocation of a certificate of authorization. A certificate is revoked if there are false, misleading, or erroneous information. 2, issued in error. 3, if the applicant withdraws the request, and if there's a breach of the terms. 33, stop work order. 1, if the work contravenes, then there's an order to cease. The order is delivered by a bylaw officer. 3, the order will specify the nature of the contravention and the date. Resumption of work. 34, this work may resume once compliance has been certified by bylaw enforcement officer. Part 6 of fees. 35, application fee. 1, administration fee of $35 plus $100 per hectare. 2, no fees for the cutting of branches if prescribed. B, dead, diseased, or hazardous tree. C, mandatory declaration for tree cutting outside of the urban boundary. 36, deposit and delivery of security. 1, except for a project that has already been, for which there has already been made a deposit, all requests must be accompanied by a $500 per tree to plant, $500 per 10 centimeters of DBH for trees of interest, and C, $500 per 100 square meters of wooded lots to be protected. 2, to guarantee the security shall be released if it is work is confirmed. If the planting or the protection is not fulfilled, the city will maintain it. 37, financial compensation for each tree that cannot be planted. A monetary compensation of $500 per planting tree shall be payable to the city. 38, the use of funds. Fees collected under this bylaw shall be used by the city for sustainable development purposes such as tree planting. Part 7, application of the bylaw. 39, implementation. 1, the council will designate enforcement officers. 2, the bylaw enforcement officers are authorized to enter and examine the property to ascertain compliance. 3, the bylaw is authorized to take criminal proceedings and issue tickets. 4, insults, threats, and others may be a violation. 40, fines between $100 and $2,100 according to the nature of the offense and if it's an individual or corporation. For example, it's according to the number of trees, the number of days of noncompliance. 41, severability. When if any provision of this bylaw or part thereof is declared by a court of competent jurisdiction to be invalid, the remainder of the bylaw shall continue in force unless the court orders otherwise. And I so move, Your Worship. I propose its reading by summary. Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Godbout, seconded by Councillor Boudreau on the question. Your Worship, if you allow me, I would like to make an observation following the discussions that we heard earlier, following Mr. Poirier's comments. Under section 21, the intention is if there are trees of interest to be conserved, it has to be a part of the analysis that they don't need to pay as much for the number of trees cut or the replacement trees. We're ready to amend that and remove the maybe, and the city proposes to replace the words by exempt. So that was the intention from at the beginning. It was just a different way of writing it. There was if council is comfortable with that minor amendment, we are comfortable with it. Is there a consensus amongst council? Everybody agrees? We're missing somebody here? So, with taking all of this into consideration, all those in favor? Are there any questions? Questions from councillors? Councillor Lantaigne. Thank you, Your Worship. I have a few comments. My view with this is that it was necessary to have a regulatory framework to avoid this unnecessary cutting of trees. And this is a major step forward to preserve what we can, and it's not to discourage development. I just wanted to mention that this is a very bold project, and I'm really proud that we are going this route, that we are pioneers in this project. I would like to have seen an exemption for residential, for single family homes, as I've received a number of comments in that sense from citizens. And in reading the comments, as a matter of fact, out of the 39 of them, 16 of them said that residential single family homes be exempted from this. And most of the other comments were to the effect that they were concerned about large scale development. So I'm also afraid, as I mentioned, that developers, that people think that where there is a driveway, where they need to build their house with inflation and with the cost of housing, everybody is afraid that it's going to increase the cost of houses tremendously. And so we have to, we replace trees where the building is to be located. And same thing for streets. We can't have any development without streets, and we can't have a house without cutting trees. So that wasn't the objective here of the tree code. I just wanted to make these comments. I'm still going to vote in favor of it this evening, but because I don't want to delay the adoption. People have been waiting for a long time. People are unfortunately are not as concerned, and some people don't necessarily want to conserve trees like other developers. So for that reason, I'm still going to vote in favor of it, but I expect to come back here within the next few weeks by asking for certain amendments, and we'll see what happens then. Those were my comments. Thank you.
Madame Le Boutier.
Oui, merci, Monsieur
Thank
le
you,
maire.
Councillor Dupuis. Thank you, Your Worship. As mentioned earlier at the outset of the meeting, I'm in favor, at 98% in favor of the tree bylaw, but there are some sections which are of concern to me and contrary to Councillor Lanting. I know we say, oh, we'll adapt to it, oh, we'll adjust to it, but there are some details that I would like to see refined. And so I'm going to be voting against this tree bylaw, but I want to support, and I know that a great deal of work has been done and put forward. It's a beautiful bylaw, but for single family residents, to be the maximum, for example, that there not be extraordinary costs involved and that it takes 12 months to turn around and change things. So those are my opinion. That's my opinion, not just my opinion, but the way I see the bylaw, and I wanted to explain the reason why to residents. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. And for the same reasons as Councillor Lantang, I don't think we should have people pay for trees that have to be cut in order to build a home. But like Councillor Lantang, I will be voting for the bylaw because I want us to stop the hemorrhaging. Since we started talking about this bylaw, there have been cuts in all clear cuts in all areas of the city. So I will also come back with requests for amendments to this bylaw. Thank you, Councillor Godbout. I want to congratulate staff for this bylaw. I will be voting in favor of it. It reflects the discussions that we've held for months and even years. I recognize those who came before us and who began the work, and we're here to finish it. I have every confidence that in executing this bylaw, if we see scenarios that are not reasonable, this was not our intention, and there could be exemptions put forward if necessary. I think we have the tools we need to be accommodating to different situations. I have no hesitation this evening in voting for the bylaw because we need to stop the hemorrhaging. But also, I have confidence that we will be looking back in time and be proud of what we've done. Sometimes it's difficult to see that in the present moment because we have to live in the present moment. But I think we are showing a long-term vision for this city, which is an important one. And with time, we'll show that it was a good decision to make. So I will be voting for. Thank you. Councillor Brideau. Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to make the point, that is to say, I wanted to thank you, Charles Poirier, for coming forward and bringing out points which to him were important to mention for future developments. And I recognize the great work that Charles has done with the developers and the work that you have done up until now. I will be voting on this project too, because we have to bring this project to fruition, and we will have an opportunity to come back to it when important points or other things need to be changed along the way. Thank you. Thank you. For the question, all those in favor of this, the summary reading will say aye. Against no. A no has been registered. Councillor Duboutier. And so we continue with the third reading by title only. Councillor Godbout. Thank you, Your Worship. Tree Bylaw E1 2023. I move reading by title only. Moved and seconded by Councillor Boudreau. For the third and last reading, all those in favor will say aye. Against, nay. And no has been registered for Councillor Le Boutillier. Now, with 1.2, bylaw C1, traffic and parking, and just quick comment, following the last meeting, something was added this evening, which is item 42, industrial streets. So both sides of the street, all along the street, is parking is prohibited. This is by way of information that this section was added to proposed changes. Thank you. As raised earlier, for summary reading, summary reading, and who will do the reading? Councillor Turgeon-Roy. Thank you. Summary, bylaw C21, traffic, bylaw C123, traffic and parking, under the powers pursuant to the vested by the Local Governance Act, S&V 2017, Chapter 18, and the Motor Vehicle Act, Chapter 17, the Municipal Council duly assembled enacts as follows. Part 1 and P-123 remain unchanged under this past November 22, accepting the following amendments. Amendment to Annex A, prohibited parking, adding section 27. 27 is the Dover Road A at all times, both sides of the street from Amory Road to the city boundary, adding section 28, Rue des Élèves, at all times, both sides of Boulevard Dieppe for a distance of 125 meters, adding section 29 at all times, both sides of the Dieppe Boulevard for 130 amendment to section 42, Industrial Road at all times, both sides of the street along the road. I so move. Moved by Councillor Turgeon-Roy, seconded by Councillor Godet. On the question. Question, all those in favor of this resolution will say aye. Against, no. A third reading has been passed. I'm sorry, summary reading, and we will move to the third and last reading. Councillor Turgeon-Roy. Oh, I have to find it now. By title. Bylaw C-1 2023, a bylaw relating to traffic and parking in the city of Dieppe. I so move by title alone. Moved by Councillor Turgeon-Roy, seconded by Councillor Godet. On the question. There being no questions, all those in favor will say aye. Against, nay. 11.2.2 is carried by third reading. This brings us to bylaw C1. Oh, I'm sorry, we've just done that one. To amend the zoning bylaw. Eleven point 3. 11.1.2 is in this two places. Reading in its entirety, Z 1021-7. Who will do the reading? Councillor Boudreau. Thank you, Your Worship. Bylaw Z-10 2021-7, bylaw to amend the City of Dieppe zoning bylaw. The Council of the City of Dieppe, under the authority vested in it by the Community Planning Act NB 2017, Chapter 19, enacts as follows. The City of Dieppe zoning bylaw, being bylaw number Z10 2021, enacted on the 12th day of April 2021 and filed in the Westmoreland County Registry Office as number 411-73189 on April 15, 2021 is hereby amended as follows. Schedule A, entitled The City of Dieppe Zoning Map, wherever it is mentioned in the text of the zoning bylaw, is amended by the map hereto attached as Schedule A-6. I so move. Moved by Councillor Boudreau, seconded by Councillor. Sorry, I just drew a blank. Councillor Thibodeau, I'm sorry. On the question, all those in favor of this bylaw will say aye, against nay. Z-10 2021-7 to amend the zoning bylaw is passed by summary reading and title. And we will proceed with the third reading by title alone. Thank you, Worship. Bylaw Z-10 2021-7, bylaw to amend the City of Dieppe zoning bylaw. I so move by third reading. Moved by Councillor Boudreau, seconded by Councillor. It's late. Yes, it's starting to get late. For Councillor Thibodeau, by title alone, all those in favor of this resolution will say aye, against nay. The resolution is passed by reading third reading by title. This brings us to bylaw C-34 2023 concerning streets, sidewalks, and trails. First reading and second reading by title. For the first reading of the title, Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. Bylaw C-3423, bylaw of the City of Dieppe concerning the streets, sidewalks, and trails. I so move the first reading by title alone. Moved by Councillor Thibodeau, seconded by Councillor Piochon-Roy. On the question. No question. All those in favor will say aye. Against nay. Bylaw C-34 is carried in first reading. We'll move now to second reading by title alone. Once again, Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. Bylaw C-34 2023, a bylaw of the City of Dieppe concerning the streets, sidewalks, and trails. I so move by second reading title alone. Moved second reading by title alone. Councillor Thibodeau, seconded by Councillor Turgeon-Roy. All those in favor of the second reading will say aye. Against nay. Second reading is passed by title alone. Notices of motion. There was a notice of motion. Councillor Dupuy wanted the floor. Considering my last notice of motion, it was based on the information that had been provided to me. We thought that there would be more time. And so I'm going to withdraw the motion. And if you remember, we wanted to look at completely looking at buffer zones between various zones as we had earlier this evening. So staff is going to look at all of this information, and we'll come back with suggestions to what can be recommended from the beginning of autumn. So I'm satisfied with this because this project is a fairly major one. It takes time to think about it. We've just had this major pre-bylaw come out. It's the same team. So I'm going to withdraw this notice of motion. Thank you. This brings us to 13 inquiries and announcements by members of council. And Councillor Gaudette first. Thank you, Your Worship. I have nothing to report for this evening. Thank you. Councillor Le Boutillier. Yes, thank you. I have 3 quick points to raise this evening. I have some residents on Dieppe Street. There's a children's park in the area, and they find that there isn't any fence around it. There's the road right there, and they would like this to be looked at by the city because the parents think that it's dangerous. Even when I went to look at it, and there's a slope there, and cars park on the corner, so a child could easily run behind the car because there's a slope there. We should look at that because there has been a great deal of development in the area. So we could see why there's no fence there. So the residents from that neighborhood are requesting a fence to protect the playground on Dieppe Street. Noted. Thank you. The second one, let me put my glasses on. Right. I've been asked if we're looking in the medium and long term at an exit from the industrial park, which would leave Dieppe to go to the highway. Is that being looked at? Yes, the land is already owned by the Department of Transportation. This is something that we had requested for the ramp. It's up to the province to execute the idea. So it would be an exit to Route 15. We hope, and we have we asked the question. So it's provincial jurisdiction? Yes, that's right. Okay, thank you. Another question that has been raised to me is that we have a lot of infrastructure products. And so all these infrastructure products are 100% subcontracted to engineering companies, or is work being done internally for our infrastructure projects? The experts and those who have the equipment are engineering firms. We can do some small projects in engineering. I think next week we'll be doing some small projects for surfacing. But when we're talking about changing infrastructure or doing water conduits, we go to the experts who have all the resources that we don't have, and they can do the best follow-up. So we're still looking at things. We oversee the project to see if it's complicated, if it's less complicated, we could, because we always ask ourselves, we're getting bigger and bigger. We have more and more infrastructure projects. And when we're paying 90,000, 80,000 every time, don't we want to hire and have a small team internally? I don't really know, but I'm just wondering if we're looking at this type of thing on a regular basis, or at least would it be beneficial for the city to have a small team internally? Are there any advantages to that? That is how I was thinking. That's a good point. Thank you. Could we have a resolution to continue after 10 o'clock? That's in 2 minutes. Councillor Boudreau? Thank you, Worship. I have nothing to add for this evening. Thank you, Councillor Thibodeau. I'll be brief. I simply want to congratulate all those who are graduating from Mathieu Martin for completing their high school studies. It's an occasion to celebrate, and I hope they celebrate safely. Thank you, Councillor Turgeon-Roy. Thank you, Your Worship. Same thing. I congratulate those who are finishing at the Collège Communautaire in Dieppe. That's it for me. Thank you.
Merci, Madame Godbout.
Councillor Godbout, annual meeting of the Police Authority here on June 22nd in the City Hall in Dieppe. Thank you. Councillor Lantang. Thank you, Worship. I'll finish before 10 o'clock. Quickly, have we started doing the lines, the crosswalk lines? It's being underdone. It's confirmed that we've measured between the trail and the park and the other trail which crosses Vanguard or Vanier. We had talked about that, painting those lines a couple of times, matter of safety. I'm hoping it's in the plans. With that, I end by congratulating our CEO. I do it on behalf. So thank you for 35 beautiful years. Mark, I know that you've done a great deal of good for the municipality. Thank you and congratulations. And in conclusion, I would also like to sincerely thank all the staff for the excellent work you do. We know that you are overrun with all kinds of work. There are major files. We know that we're after you, not only us and the citizens, be it the tree bylaw or the big projects we talked about tonight. And I think all the kinds of requests are on the rise. We hope that we're not stressing you too much. And we thank you. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Good night, everyone. Good night, everyone.